Good evening. Good evening. This is Eric Wagner, and how you doing? Everything is well, and there's no problems. Uh, Let me give you a little rundown upon our programs, and then I'll tell you what we were just listening to. Okay? This is WFRE Radio, and we're on air every Tuesday night from 9 to 11 o'clock. From 9 to 10, the first and third Tuesday of the month is Bill Brady. From the second and fourth Tuesday of the month is Paul Reese. From the 10th to 11, from 10 to 11 every week, the Hourglass with yours truly, Eric Wagner. And what we were listening to was something called Wagner. And what we had basically here was a situation in which you heard Wagner, who is a composer from 1900s, before the 1900s to be precise. And that first one was Götterdämmerung, and the second one was Tristan. And if you don't know who Wagner was, he was a very, very famous German composer. And just recently they had his music, his opera, played at the Philharmonic Hall, and it was very, very, very good. I didn't go see it, but I've seen his operas on stage by Kiri, which is a really excellent one. So tonight we're going to try to discuss Wagner and Nietzsche, and the combination of these two people who really lived together in terms of history. Wagner was a very interesting person. He got most of his money to fund his operas from a character who is called King Frederick. And King Frederick would finance Wagner's operas, and they were incredible. His whole philosophy was based upon the idea of the Superman philosophy. He was glorifying the titanic giants of the world. And Wagner did a lot of operas that were based upon the old gods, Norwegian gods, the old gods of the past, these titanic supermen, if you want to call them. And Nietzsche, a German philosopher who believed in the Superman race, the Superman philosophy, was very much a follower of Wagner, and Wagner was very much a follower of Nietzsche. For, you see, Nietzsche preached the Superman philosophy in words and books, and Wagner glorified the Superman philosophy in music. And what you had basically was a combination of a very profound experience in terms of music and philosophy. And Wagner took a lot of his operas and he utilized a lot of different things in terms of his operas. For example, in Götterdämmerung, at the ending of that one you heard, is on stage, they have this incredible flood come on stage. They do it with some kind of stage scenery, and we see this gigantic flood, and the water maidens come on the stage, and in one part you hear where the evil one, Hagen, is calling out to the maidens to get the ring, and he falls into the water and he drowns. And what happens is Brunhilde, see, the whole thing is this. I'll do it very quickly. I'll give you a rundown of basically what the story is all about. His operas are all about. That's better, I think. Siegfried is the hero of the opera. Siegfried gets killed in the opera. What happens is Brunhilde at the end calls out to her lover who's on the fire, and they're going to burn the corpse, and she says, "I'm going to come to you, my lover." And what she does, there's this fire, and Wagner's on the fire, his corpse is burning, and then Brunhilde jumps into the fire with her horse. And when she jumps into the fire, she dies in the fire with Siegfried. What happens then is that the gods, Valhalla, is destroyed, and this whole ending is where you have this whole scenery of where Valhalla is being destroyed, the home of the gods, and it's really an incredible scene to see in an opera, in Götterdämmerung. with Nietzsche dealing with Wagner, you have a situation in which Nietzsche talked about the idea of the Superman in terms of the philosophical way. Nietzsche believed that man lives upon the will to power, that life is the will to power, and that the era of history begins when, say, for example, Christianity began. Nietzsche believed that the era of history began dealing with Socrates and dealing with Jesus, for this is when man began to really moralize. And as Nietzsche believed, that once man began to moralize, man began to move away from reality, which was the will to power, and man began to go against reality, which was the will to power. Man began to moralize life. He began to talk about equality. He began to talk about the idea that life was something more than it really was. So what you basically had was Nietzsche believed that life was the will to power, and what you had was Christianity saying everyone is equal, and that weak is good and strong is bad. And what Nietzsche believed was that strong was good and weakness was bad, because if you look at nature, he said, you see nature in terms of the will to power, in terms of that people live in the nature of the will to power, that everything is the will to power, and that when Christianity occurred and when Socrates occurred, they said, well, no, we have to moralize, and by moralizing, we allow weakness to exist. And this is where Nietzsche said, no, this is the problem in life, that we have gone against life in terms of philosophy. And this is what you had, in fact, dealing with Christianity, as Nietzsche believed. He felt that Christianity was something of an era of history and had to be corrected. So basically what you had was Nietzsche talking about the Superman in terms of words, and you had Wagner glorifying the Superman in terms of music. You had this kind of harmony of a philosophy occurring, which was really incredible. It was only at the end of Nietzsche's career that Wagner and Nietzsche fell out of place. For when Wagner was going on to different types of operas, he became more Christian thinking. So what happened was Nietzsche fell out with Wagner in terms of philosophy, because Wagner became more Christian thinking, and as Nietzsche believed that Christianity is the poison of man, poison of mankind, because of the fact that what we're dealing with is, again, something against the nature of man. It's rather interesting to find out that dealing with Wagner always in his music gives this type of very Superman type of atmosphere. I didn't bring some other operas down tonight dealing with Siegfried, which is a really incredible opera. Siegfried fights the dragon. He goes through so many incredible episodes. The film by Max Ernst, a silent film that was made about Siegfried, is really incredible. The scene where he's fighting the dragon. It's an incredible experience because of the fact that what you're dealing with is a situation in which Wagner has taken this imagery and has made it into music. He has made this kind of Superman type of thought into a kind of great deal of music. If you ever go to a Wagnerian opera, you'll see people almost being in ecstasy in terms of what they're listening to and what they're experiencing. So basically what you have here is that you have a philosophy being experienced on two levels, the philosophy of music and the philosophy of intellect. And so what you have, again, is Nietzsche talking about the attitude that the will to power is life and not renouncing that will to power, and that in our society we have accepted renouncing our will to power, accepting the philosophy of equality. Nietzsche believed that eventually man would return back to nature. For example, he believed in the eternal reoccurrence. And as he termed it, it would be something that eventually everything would occur again, because history or life must repeat itself. He felt that life would reach a point, it would end and begin again, that the whole process would go on into infinity, that every single century or centuries and centuries and centuries, the whole process would begin again. So he called it the eternal reoccurrence. He said that Nietzsche himself would return again in terms of his philosophy, and that eventually, through the eternal reoccurrence, the true philosophy of life would be manifested and come into being, and that the era of history, the era of man, would be prevented. This is what he felt the Superman would eventually do, the super race, in terms of life. The Superman would be a revolution against the era of history, as he termed it. So you basically have a situation in which the Superman race, would be something of a high intensification of the will to power, overcoming the herd. In his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which is the poetic version of the Superman, Zarathustra talks about the man still being very much like the ape, that the ape is very much like something that has not yet evolved into man, and the Superman looks upon man as still the ape. And so the fact is that, as Nietzsche believed, that man has not yet evolved into what he would call man. And Nietzsche believed that the intellect would paralyze and dissect the will to power. So therefore he was very much against the intellect. So back to the Wagner. Wagner manifested what Nietzsche believed in terms of music. Hitler really loved Wagner because he felt that whoever wanted to know anything about Nazism, one must know Wagner, because he felt Wagner was the spirit of Germany, was the spirit of the soul of the German. And of course, Wagner preached the Superman philosophy in music. And Adolf Hitler believed in the Superman philosophy and identified very much with Wagner in terms of music. After Hitler had heard Tristan, one of Wagner's operas, he went to a hilltop with his friend, and he was almost in a trance. And it is from that point there that he believed destiny came into his life, and that he felt that he was going to do great things for Germany. So Wagner was a great inspiration, a very great mystical inspiration for Hitler. They always term, the historians, the Gotterdammerung to Hitler's last days on Earth as this very traumatic and very, very horrifying experience. Gotterdammerung is the last act, is the last opera that Wagner wrote in the series dealing with the Superman philosophy, from Siegfried, Valkyrie, to Tristan, and to Gotterdammerung, Das Rheingold. This is the whole series of operas Wagner wrote within a period of 20 years. It's rather interesting. The man that Wagner got his money off to build his sets for the operas was rather a senile king, Frederick the Second, sorry. He was a very senile man. In his basement, in his castle, he would have this gigantic cave of all the paintings of Wagner's operas, and he would have swans take him around this lake that he had built in his basement of his castle, and he'd have the Wagner operas being played as he would travel around this lake in his basement that he had, and he'd have these swans pull this boat as he listened to the Wagnerian operas, which is really incredible. I mean, he was considered insane, this king, and he died at the age of 40. But how he went to experience Wagner is incredible. I mean, so Wagner. Back to Wagner. Wagner was considered, at that time, his music was considered very bad. It's very much like Freud. When Freud first came out with his theories, other psychologists would see him on the street and walk on the other side. The same thing with Wagner. When Wagner first came out with his music, people would look at him and they would say his music was terrible. But today, Wagner is acclaimed as the greatest composer of all times and has a great following. And the reason why I'm giving this show here now is because of the fact that they just recently gave some shows of Wagner in the city, and I just wanted to have my little bit of Wagner here tonight and open you up to Wagner, because I don't know if many people are aware of Wagner and his philosophy that he deals with in terms of music. So I'm just going to talk for a few more minutes more, and we're going to play another piece, last piece from Tristan, which is really an incredible piece. One more thing, let me identify the radio station. This is WFRE Radio 54, and this is Eric Wagner. And let me continue on for a few more minutes, and I'm not going to keep you here much longer. I want you to listen to a little more Wagner. But again, dealing with Wagner, I would like to make the point that Wagner is very often identified with Hitler in terms of Nazism. And he has gotten a bad name for it in terms of his operas. But if one looks at music as music, one cannot deny he was a genius of a composer. So without any further delay, I'm going to play the last piece of Tristan by Wagner. This is Eric Wagner. Good night.